We'll do a flash mob in here.
All right, we're going to start on 147. This is at the very top of the page. We read this little paragraph last week, so we'll lead into this week by reviewing the paragraph. 147. And the discussion has been about, if you recall, some definitions of just Yirat Hashem, or Yirat Shamayim, or Yirat Chet. Three ways of putting it. Being afraid, Yirah is afraid, or fear, or awe, or trembling. We talked about that a lot last time. And being afraid of God, being afraid of sin, being afraid of heaven, kind of a basic ethical structure, knowing the difference between right and wrong. I noticed, it comes up in the prayer service all the time. I just happened to notice this morning, we do Shirat Hayam, so the Song of the Sea, every morning, and before you do it, there's a paragraph that's from the Torah. Actually, the whole song is from the Torah, but there's a paragraph from the Torah that introduces it, and it's right after the people cross the Red Sea, and then the sea drowns the Egyptian army, and the people are looking. They look over and they see the Egyptian army drowning, and it says Vayiru et Adonai. Right after God destroys the Egyptian army, it says Vayiru et Adonai. So they were afraid of God. That's Yirah. They were afraid of God. Vayaminu b'Adonai, and so they believed in God. So although the translation "they were afraid of God" doesn't do justice to what they just felt, they'd just been liberated from Egypt, and their greatest fear that the Egyptian army was going to just massacre them had suddenly been lifted. So they're afraid. They're not really afraid. They're just, I don't know, they're in awe. This power just rescued them, just made them free, just destroyed the Egyptian army that was going to slaughter them. Vayiru et Adonai, and they had that fear of God. So it has so many just nuances and variations of meaning that it's really hard to translate. Here it seems to be just kind of basic ethics, and there's a series of stories. You see a series of stories, a series of passages that extol a basic Yirat Hashem better than anything. It's better than being an accomplished Torah scholar or the greatest genius in the world. All right, we'll read the story, page 147. Rabbi Simon and Rabbi Eleazar havu yadfe. So Rabbi Simon, two rabbis, and Eleazar were sitting. Chalef azel Rabbi Yaakov bar Acha. Rabbi Yaakov bar Acha passed by. Amar lechad lechavre. One said to another. What we don't know now, and that'll become clearer, or a subject of debate later, is who's talking first. But one said to the other, Ne kumikame. Let's get up. We should stand up. Degvar dachil chata'inhu. Because this is a person who fears chet, sin. Person who fears sin, and that merits that he should get up. Already it's kind of a surprising things to say, because you are supposed to stand up in front of a Torah scholar, someone who's a better Torah scholar than you. It's basic Talmudic etiquette. You stand up. But he's not saying, let's stand up because he's a great Torah scholar. Let's stand up because he's a good person. Amar idach, the other person says, we don't know which of them are talking, but the other says, Neku mikame degvar bar Orionhu. So he says, which is the more standard, we should stand up because this is a man of great Torah learning. And we stand up before people of great Torah learning. Amar. So the other guy says to him, Aminalach, Ana, degvar dachil chati'inhu. But wait a second, I told you that he's a person who fears sin. Ve'amartali at bar uryanhu. And you're telling me we should stand because he's a great Torah scholar? Obviously, I'm right. That's what he's saying. Obviously, I'm right. We stand before people. We show respect to people who are good people. Not necessarily if they're Torah scholars. Because the idea, of course, is that a Torah scholar can be a bad person. Right? Someone who's got the intricacies, the intelligence necessary to master Torah may not actually be a good person. Don't assume that they always go together. That's what he's saying. It's his basic lesson. So let's not give them the full respect. The full respect goes to good people. All right. We read that last time. Going to continue. Second paragraph. Tistayim de Rabbi Elazar hu de Amar de Gvar de Chayil Chata'inhu. All right. So since we don't know who said what, we should conclude that it's Rabbi Elazar that said, this is a person who fears sin. And therefore is Rabbi Elazar, who's of the opinion that you stand before people who fear sin. De Amar Rabbi Yochanan, because we know that from a previous statement, De Amar Rabbi Yochanan, because Rabbi Yochanan said, Mishum Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Yochanan said, in the name of Rabbi Elazar. So a previous statement of Rabbi Elazar, Ein lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu be'olamo, ela yirat shamayim bilvad. So this is the statement originally from Rabbi Elazar. All God has in God's world is Yirat Shamayim. Yirat Shamayim, the fear of heaven. Notice that they're using these terms interchangeably. Yirat Shamayim, Yirat Chet, Yirat Hashem, fear of God, fear of heaven, fear of sin. They all seem to mean pretty much the same thing, although we could actually come up with slight differences. But they seem to be using these terms interchangeably. Anyway, Rabbi Elazar says that that's all God cares about. In the end, that's all God cares about. That's all that's in God's world. You want to define God's world? God's world is fear of God. Or God's world is ethics, being a good person. That's all God really cares about. The rest is just detail. That's his statement. Shne'emar, and he gets it from Scripture, Ve'ata Yisrael, ma Adonai Elohecha sho'el me'imach ki'im liyirah, etc. And this is a famous quote from the prophet, who's it from? It's prophet, it's from Deuteronomy. There's restatements of it in the prophets. It's still a famous statement. Now, Israel, what does God ask of you except, God, in other words, God asked nothing from you except being fearful of God. That's all I really ask of you. Everything flows from that. Uchativ. And it also says in another passage, Vayomer la'adam hein yirat Adonai hi chochma. And another passage says, I say to you, man, hein yirat Adonai hi chochma, that to fear God is wisdom. Now, I've never seen this before in the Talmud. There's a play on words. There's lots of plays on words in the Talmud, lots of puns. But here the play on words is in the Greek. So they're actually using a Greek pun. And I have to say they lose me here because I don't know Greek. I don't know ancient Greek. I don't know if any of you do. So I can't verify the pun, whether it still works or whether they knew enough Greek to really make Greek puns. Clearly they thought they did. Anyway, this is the pun. Shekain b'lashon Yevani, because in Greek, korin achad hein. Because in Greek, the word hein means one. Tistayim. All right, so the pun is that the phrase Vayomer la'adam hein yirat Adonai. So God says to man, fear of God is wisdom, but you have the word hen means verily, something like that. But verily, the word hen in Greek means one, which would mean with the pun, all God wants from you is one thing. Hen, the one thing, even God's even speaking here in Greek, so the non-Jews can understand. One thing is all I want from you, and that is fear of God. Hen being the Greek word for one. Anybody know if that's true, by the way? Any Greek scholars here? I actually don't know. So you notice, Steinsaltz actually makes a little note, and he writes the word out in Greek letters, where he loses me, of course. I can't read Greek letters either. Ancient Greek letters. And I think he confirms that, in fact, it does mean that in ancient Greece. I don't know about modern Greek. All right. Any questions, comments? Okay. Darash Rav Ula. So Rav Ula made a drash. My dichtiv. In other words, he commented on this verse, following verse. Al tirsha harbe. Do not be overmuch wicked. Harbe means don't be wicked a lot. Harbe hu deloy lirsha? Hama'at lirsha? So the verse says, don't be very wicked, so we can be a little bit wicked? That's his question. The verse says, don't be overmuch wicked. And then the implication is that you can be a little bit wicked. But that can't be right. Right? Really, the Torah can't be teaching us just be a little bit wicked. Just petty theft. Don't go into grand larceny. It can't really be saying that. So, Ella, Misha achal shum v'recho nodef, yachzor v'yochal shum acher v'hi recho nodef. All right. So it's saying if you've eaten a little bit of garlic, and you can smell it on your breath, don't go and eating more garlic because it'll be even worse. So it doesn't mean just do a little bit wicked, but it says if you've done a little bit wicked, don't think you can somehow cover it up by doing even more. Right? Just so it's an interesting sort of philosophy of life. Don't because you could give the advice don't ever be wicked. And you know that some people will all of us actually are imperfect, so we're going to do something wicked, something we shouldn't do in our life. So he's saying, so just don't let that lead you into further wickedness. Darash Rava Bar Ula. So Rava Bar Ula, commenting on this verse, My dichtiv ki ein chartzubot lemutam uvari ulam. All right, so this is Rav Ula is quoting the following verse, or he's commenting on it from Psalms. There are no pangs at their death, and their body is sound, referring to righteous people. But he's going to make a play on words with this. It's interesting, a clever play on words. Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu. What does God mean by this? Lo dayan l'risha'im she'enam charedim va'atzivim b'yom hamitah. It's not enough that wicked people are not upset, or I would say chared means like fearing. They're not in trembling of the day of their death. Remember we talked about that a couple weeks ago. Just why are we afraid to die? We're afraid to die because one, for all sorts of reasons. But one is that we're afraid of giving an account of what we've done. We're afraid of that judgment. We had that whole passage of the judgment before the pearly gates. We're afraid of answering those questions. What if we answer it wrong? So we're afraid of ultimate punishment. One definition they're giving of a wicked person is they're not afraid of dying. Because for some reason that just missed them. It goes beyond them. It floats away. They don't have any sense of it that it's going to matter. That they never have to give an accounting. So God's saying it's not enough that they're. It's a very interesting. We should unpack that a bit. I mean, that's part of the fear of death. Is a fear of sin, fear of God. You deep down, you're concerned about the accounting that you have to give, or you can say you're concerned for the memory you're going to leave behind. Are people going to think that I was basically a nasty person, and when I'm dead, I'm still going to care about that, or I care about it now. I care about what people are going to say about me after I die. I care about the punishment I might receive in the next world. Wicked people don't. They're not afraid of that. So it's Ela shalibam bari lahem ku'ulam, but their conscience is completely, bari means healthy, but it means free. I'm free of any kind of perturbance of my conscience.
Do you think that it could mean the reverse, that somebody who doesn't fear death means that they're wicked?
Say that again.
It's the reverse. That if a person doesn't fear death, that they're considered wicked? Oh,
no, I don't think so. Because I think it's trying to explain why people are wicked. So I don't think it's putting a judgment on beliefs in particular. I think it's trying to dig down deep into why some people are bad, some people are good, and this is one of the reasons that one of the ways that we define or diagnose a wicked person is they don't care about the consequences. They sort of and I think you're going to see they feel like that's a discipline. Like you have to train yourself, or it's something you have to learn to be concerned for the consequences, and ultimately it's those consequences that are beyond your life.
You really have to fear someone who has no conscience.
You have to, yeah. Yes.
It seems that if you. It's not necessarily fearing death, but what you said, fearing the accounting that you're going to have to give.
Well, that's clear because earlier we had an accounting story, yeah.
So if you're comfortable, at least as much as a human being can be, that when you give that accounting, you're going to be okay.
Right, but you're less afraid of dying.
And it's not necessarily a fear of death, it's
more
of a...
Although I think if you're feeling like you settled your accounts, then you're less afraid of dying. And some of the accounts you have to settle are ethical accounts. Like, I've sort of made it good for people. Do you remember that scene? There's a scene in one of the Godfather movies where it's really important suddenly for Michael, who's the Godfather, is clearly a wicked person, to do confession. And he's older, he's feeling he has diabetes and he has chest pains he's afraid of dying too. And he's a modern person. There's something deep in. It's just a movie, but it resonated. I think people. There's lots of reasons we're afraid of dying. You have 10 people that can give you 10 reasons, but this is suggesting that's one of the reasons. We are a bit afraid of making that accounting. Wicked people are a little less afraid. But the point of the movie is even a very wicked person, at some point, at the point of dying, or maybe that was like his slight conscience, his slight ethics is that, and maybe that's his tragedy too. He's been a bad person his whole life, and now he feels really bad about it.
Is that the arrogance of living as though you'll never have to give an account?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Well, where did this concept of giving an account come from? Is that biblical?
It starts in the Bible. There's hints of it in the Bible, but it's certainly developed. It's more developed in the Talmud.
Yeah,
in the oral law,
I was just wondering. So it's the Talmud.
Yeah. Okay.
If you look at the Adam and Eve story, let's say the earliest that we have in our record, there's guilt. It wasn't trained into Adam to be guilty.
Well, that's interesting. So with the Adam and Eve story, they don't feel guilty until they eat the tree of not the fruit, and it's the fruit that creates the guilt.
God speaks to them, they try to hide
because they feel guilty because they ate the fruit. Yeah, right. So
it suggests that it's innate.
Yeah, it's innate, but some people have it. So everything that's innate, Look, playing basketball is also innate. Anybody can pick up a basketball and start. I mean, there's, you've just the basic activity any human being can do. It's just that some people are better at it than others, and some people have more of an interest in it and will practice more. And the same thing is true with ethics. So some people are going to be more afraid of dying for ethical reasons than others.
But if going back, as Earth did, if you go back to Cain and Abel, then think of Cain.
Yeah.
And
less afraid, right? Less afraid of the consequences.
Also,
No, it's a learning thing.
But it becomes learning, right? So he learns
right.
it, right?
You can't just behave like this and there's no consequence. You behave like this and there is a consequence.
Yeah. When we were talking about fear of God, we've been talking about it now for 3 weeks, but one way, interesting way I've heard it explained is that you're just afraid of disappointing God. Just disappointment. Just like if you're very close to somebody, you're married to somebody, it's a child, it's a good friend, and you do something, you don't think necessarily, you do something wrong to that person. You don't think that person's going to punish you necessarily, but you are very afraid of disappointing that person. It will make you feel bad to be living with their disapproval. And in fact, it could make you feel very, very bad. So you could be very afraid of living with their disapproval. And that might be the one thing that stops you from doing something that you really want to do. So I think that's also part of the fear of God. And then you ramp that up because it's God, and then you're about to die. So you've got all these very deep and important feelings, and then it's that fear of God, fear of death, becomes fear of sin.
There's an implication here that if you don't have the fear of God, then you're not motivated to be good.
It's a motivation to be good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, a motivation.
Which
to be
I
good.
think a lot of people might not agree with that.
Well, here it's a pre-modern text. Everybody then agreed with it. So no, it's nowadays. So we have to, I think, understand the concept more broadly and try to figure out. I mean, what does it mean? So because we're still good people. I mean, what motivates us to be good? What deters us from being bad? I think there's still those forces that exist. Let's keep going. Hainu demar Rabbah. My dichtiv zedarkam kosel lamo. So this is what Rabbah said, and he's analyzing this little piece of scripture. Their way is foolish. So their way is foolish. It refers to wicked people, and this is sort of the Talmud's idea too. Is it's foolish to be wicked because of the accounting you're going to have to give. And they're too stupid to know it. I mean, we may doubt that nowadays. Modern people may doubt it, but they didn't doubt it, and they felt like the only real explanation for wickedness is that there's something missing. There's something cognitive missing that's so stupid. Now, it is there's an element of foolishness in wicked behavior. It doesn't mean that smart people are never wicked. They are. They can be very wicked. But there's an element of foolishness, something they're missing. Let me finish this. Yodim Risha'im Shedarkam Lamita. Wicked people know they're going to die. V'yesh lahem chelev al kislam. But they have fat on their innards. So this is as close as they come to a physiological, psychological explanation. But you have to read it metaphorically. There's a block in their innards, a block in their heart. And sometimes, the Bible talks about the circumcision on the heart. Like you have to, not the foreskin on the heart. Like you have to circumcise your heart to get rid of the rough exterior, which is preventing you from really feeling the pain of another person, which is another word for conscience. And that's the issue. The issue with wicked people is they seem so incredibly foolish. How could they be wicked? They know they're going to give an accounting. So the issue is not so much foolishness as something is blocking their heart. There's almost like a hardening of the arteries or a blocking of the blood on the way to the brain. They're missing something, and since they're missing something, it makes them wicked.
Now, the fat around the kidneys is the most delicate of fat. I'm trying to figure out how that figures in here.
It's all metaphoric. It's all metaphor. They're using it as just like we would use the heart as the seat of love, of conscience. They're using the innards. Like where does conscience come from? So the kishkas. It's the kishkas, yeah. And there's something that's blocking their kishkas. I wouldn't go too far. I mean, you could if you want to, but since I know nothing about human biology, I'm not going to go very far in trying to understand it literally, because it's very clearly a metaphor anyway. So, all right. Shema Tomar, Shechacha Mehen, and if you were to say no, they just forget. Because that's another thing. Oh, I forgot that I'm going to die. I forgot that I give it a convenient forgetting. I forgot that I have to give an accounting. Talmud Lomar V'acharehem befihem yirtzu sela. Their end is in their consciousness. They're in their mouth, it says. So it's not that they forget that they're going to die. It's that there's a block in their heart, and that prevents them from being afraid of dying, or afraid of the consequence of their sinful, wicked life. Yes.
Well, couldn't you just instead of wicked, say a narcissist, and
Yeah.
look at certain politicians and our,
Yeah, for sure.
They don't fear God.
Yeah.
or they don't fear the consequences.
Right.
They
Yeah.
don't think they're going to get caught.
Right. I mean, we let's say in a psychological culture, we would come up with diagnoses for this. A narcissistic personality is someone who's got a block in the kishkas, right? That's it. Someone we're right and wrong at key moments. It's just not getting through. Despite and very often, somebody looking at it objectively is going to say, gosh, there's going to be very serious consequences for that affair you're having with that intern, Mr. President. Sorry, but this anonymous president, this hypothetical president, he's not aware of it. I mean, he's a smart guy. Everybody knows he's a smart guy, but there's a block. There's a block, which tells him he's going to get away with it again and again and again, and I think that's very real. That's wicked people have that, good people have it, and an ethical person wrestles with it. That's it. An ethical person is aware of it, aware of all our rationales that we invent for ourselves to say, I'm really doing a good thing here, or I won't get away with it, or I'm not harming her, I'm not harming my family. It's a little bit of fun. That's all it is. So a good person wrestles with that, understands that it's there, and wrestles with it. And a bad person is barely aware of it. It's just moving forward.
Is there an issue with regard to definition of what is wicked?
Yeah. I got that. For sure. Although there's also objective criteria for it too. And a wicked person, let's say, is always going to be able to explain their behavior as not being wicked, rationalize their behavior. That's the fat in the kidneys too.
Speaking of hearts and looking at, I know that we're studying fear, that word fear, but the place in Deuteronomy 10:12 where that comes from, there's the rest of the sentence, which is and love and follow his path.
Oh, right, that's right. That's right.
So it's kind of
it's not really fair that you looked up the.
I mean, isn't it supposed to be in context though? And I kind of object to them taking it out of context without at least placing in that there's other stuff that.
So of course they take things out of context all the time because that's the only way they can prove their points, and they want to use scripture to prove their points. So they it's not just taking, they wrench things out of context as a way of
bad lawyering.
So I would call it I call it creativity. It's creativity. It's creative writing.
I think they're not fearing enough.
I think they're not lawyers. They're creative writers. They're philosophers. So, but at the same time, I'll bring up a serious point. Is that just in reading the Talmud, they were the people they're writing for all knew the Torah by heart. So they all would have known the rest of the verse. So they're not hiding anything from you by wrenching it out of context. They all know the rest of the verse. They expect that you know the rest of the verse, and they expect you to add that to your understanding of their wrestling with it too. So they know that Catherine's reading this, and she understands that there's more to it. There's more to it. In fact, that's every Talmud teacher will say you have to look up the verse. Because very often they're expecting you to be aware of the rest of the verse and to add that to the discussion. So you just added it to the discussion because the fact is, fear of God can't be the only thing. There's got to be other details, other ways of building an ethical life. And all this is doing is helping us have a discussion about what are the building blocks of an ethical life.
Right. So I would say, as many modern people would, there can be people who don't acknowledge God, who certainly live ethical lives.
Right.
But I think when the rabbis are trying to figure things out, they're thinking of the extreme case too. And an amoral person really is not a normal, healthy person.
A
person who has no ethical sense is not psychologically normal.
Right.
He does have fat on his tissue.
Fat on his tissue. In an operation.
Something wrong with him.
Right.
Or her.
Yeah. The one thing I'll say in the Talmud, I think the idea. Although yes, I mean they were aware of mental illness and strange personalities, but in general, what they're saying is that these things can be taught, they can be developed.
Right, because we're on a spectrum.
We're on a spectrum, right? So you can go from better to better, worse to better. Right. And you can do that through specific spirit. Right? Yeah, by studying Torah.
Yes.
By studying Torah, by being taught, by reading ethical literature. Okay, we're gonna do a little bit more, and then we'll. Just to start, because we are back to the study of Shabbat laws now. And I don't know if you even remember what the original discussion was. The original discussion is, are you allowed to put out Shabbat candles on Shabbat? And if you remember that, it starts with a guy is sick. Can you put out a Shabbat candle because they need the dark in order to sleep? And the answer is yes, you can. But it led us to this whole discussion. But the discussion starts with laws of Shabbat candles. And the question was, can you put them out? So we're back to that. This is pages and pages of interesting material, philosophical, narrative material. Okay. Kichas al haner. Okay. So if you're going to put Shabbat candles out because you're a cheapskate, and you're trying to preserve your candle. That's the question. So we know you can put out the candle if you're trying to preserve the life of someone who needs the rest. But what about, look, these candles are 18 cents each. And if I let it go, it's going to burn out. I got to buy another candle. Can I put out a candle for that? Okay. Now, what if, another thing just to keep in mind, so what if you just, it's inconvenient for you. The candles are making it light. I feel like going to sleep. And I live in this one room, and I want to put out the candle just for my convenience so I can go to sleep. The answer to that is no. The answer is not no. I mean, because that's putting out the light for its own sake. I don't like the light anymore. I want it to be dark, so I'm going to put out the candle. What if you have a different motivation? It's interesting when they go into motivation. What if your motivation is to preserve the candle? It's financial motivation, as opposed to I want it to be dark. I know I know that the distinctions here are thin and slippery, but you'll see they become important. Because the motivation for doing things on Shabbat, so you'll see in the laws of Shabbat, it's not just you can do this, you can't do this. Very often it's the motivation for doing things which will tell us whether it's forbidden or not. Read a little bit more. Rabbi Yossi, Kiman Svirale. So Rabbi Yossi, who says that, I'll keep on reading. Kiman Afilu Bahanach Nami Lechalev, V'ik Rabbi Shimon Svirale, Petila Nami Leftar. Okay, so Rabbi Yossi says that we'll read it right in the Steinsaltz. Spare the lamp, the oil of the wick he is liable. Rabbi Yossi exempts in all cases, except in a case which he extinguished the flame to spare the wick. Okay, so you are allowed, in other words, to extinguish, according to this guy's opinion, the Shabbat candle, if you're trying to spare the lamp itself, or what else does he say? If you're trying to preserve a candle, if you're trying to preserve the whole structure, you can put it out. And I'll just tell you, the idea is that those things are more expensive. But if your only concern is for the wick, which is really inexpensive, then you're not allowed to put it out. Okay, so that's Rabbi Yossi's opinion. There are other rabbis that say that you're never allowed to put it out for economic reasons, only for health reasons. And there are some rabbis that say you can put it out for any economic reason, even if you're just preserving the wick, which is a matter of pennies. So we'll continue that next time.
In many societies